Marcus moved with careful precision across the stage, his eyes constantly scanning patterns in the studio lights, the geometric arrangement of the audience seating, the mathematical relationships that most people never noticed, but that provided him comfort and understanding in a world that often felt chaotic and overwhelming. He was diagnosed with nonverbal autism at age 4, but his family had learned over the years that Marcus's silence didn't mean absence of thought. In fact, his mind worked in ways that amazed even the specialists who evaluated him. He could solve complex mathematical problems in his head that would challenge graduate students. He could see patterns in everything from music to architecture to human behavior. He just couldn't or wouldn't communicate these insights through spoken words. When 14-year-old Marcus Williams walked onto the Family Feud stage, he hadn't spoken a word in over 10 years. But what happened when he started counting the buttons on Steve Harvey's jacket would teach an entire studio audience about the infinite ways love finds expression. His older sister, Jennifer, 16, had become his primary translator to the outside world. She could interpret his subtle hand movements, understand what he meant when he lined up objects in specific patterns, recognize when his stimming behaviors were expressions of joy, frustration, or deep concentration. The Williams family had developed their own language with Marcus over the years. His mother, Dr. Sarah Williams, a special education teacher, had learned to read his gestures, his expressions, the way he arranged objects to communicate complex ideas. His father, Michael, an engineer, had discovered that Marcus could communicate mathematical concepts through drawings, number sequences, and spatial arrangements that were often more precise than verbal explanations. The decision to apply for Family Feud had been Jennifer's idea, but it had taken months of careful preparation. Marcus didn't handle change well, and the thought of bright lights, loud noises, and crowds of strangers was initially overwhelming for him. But Dr. Williams had worked with the show's producers to ensure accommodations could be made, and somehow, Marcus had become excited about the prospect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Marcus had whispered, the first words anyone in the studio had heard him speak. It wasn't the game that intrigued him. It was the mathematical nature of survey questions, the statistical probability of answers, the way Family Feud was essentially applied mathematics in an entertainment format. In his mind, the show was a beautiful equation where human behavior could be predicted and quantified. Steve Harvey had been briefed about Marcus during rehearsal, but nothing could have prepared him for meeting this remarkable young man. When Steve had knelt down to Marcus's level during the family introductions, Marcus hadn't made eye contact, but he had done something unexpected. He had reached out and touched the buttons on Steve's suit jacket, counting them softly under his breath. Marcus, Steve had said gently, those are good counting skills, young man. Marcus had looked up briefly, made fleeting eye contact, and then returned to studying the patterns in Steve's jacket. But that moment of connection had been profound, two human beings recognizing each other across the vast difference in how they experienced and processed the world. Steve had looked at Dr. Williams questioningly, and she had smiled with tears in her eyes. He's been practicing speaking for weeks, she had explained quietly. He wanted to be able to participate today. The game had progressed through 3 rounds, with Marcus contributing in his own unique way. When the Williams family needed an answer, Jennifer would quietly ask Marcus, and he would whisper numbers or draw shapes in the air with his finger. Williams had become expert at interpreting these communications and translating them into verbal responses. During the second round, when asked to name something that comes in pairs, Marcus had held up 2 fingers and then pointed to his eyes. Jennifer had translated eyes, earning the number 1 answer on the board, and enthusiastic celebration from the family. But it was during the 4th round that everything changed. The question was, name something that helps you communicate. The opposing family had just failed to control the board, and it was the Williams family's opportunity to steal. Michael had given the first answer, phone, which had earned a respectable spot. Dr. Williams had followed with email, another solid response. Now it was Jennifer's turn, but as she stepped forward to the podium, Marcus suddenly became agitated. He began flapping his hands, a stimming behavior that his family recognized as excitement or urgency. He was trying to communicate something important. Jennifer, Dr. Williams said quietly, Marcus wants to say something. Jennifer knelt down beside her brother. What is it, Marcus? What helps people communicate? Marcus looked at her, then at the board, then at Steve Harvey. For a moment he seemed to be calculating something in his head, his eyes moving rapidly as if processing complex equations. Jennifer stood up and announced confidently, numbers. The answer wasn't on the board, but something about the way Marcus had said it, the conviction in his whispered response, made Steve pause. He set down his cards and approached the Williams family. Then he whispered one word, numbers. Marcus, Steve said gently. Did you say numbers? Can you tell me how numbers help you communicate? Steve asked. Marcus nodded, still avoiding eye contact but clearly engaged with the conversation in his own way. Then he did something that left the entire studio breathless. He held up his fingers in a specific pattern and whispered, 2 plus 3 plus 1 equals 6. Dr. Williams started to interpret, but Marcus surprised everyone by stepping forward himself. He approached Steve Harvey and once again began counting the buttons on his jacket. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Marcus said clearly, his voice growing stronger with each number. Marcus continued, his mathematical mind working in ways that amazed even his family. He pointed to Steve, then to himself, then held up 6 fingers again. Jennifer, who understood her brother's mathematical language better than anyone, gasped with recognition. Steve, she said, her voice filled with wonder, he's telling you that 6 means something special to him. In our house, when Marcus wants to say, I love you too, he uses the number 6, 3 words from him, 3 words back, that equals 6, which means both people said something important to each other. Steve looked confused for a moment, but Dr. Williams was crying. He's trying to tell you something, she managed to say through her tears. Marcus looked directly at Steve for the first time, made sustained eye contact for several seconds, and nodded. Marcus, Steve said softly, kneeling down to the boy's level, are you telling me that you love me too? The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey, who had entertained millions with his quick wit and humor, found himself face to face with a form of communication so pure, so mathematically elegant, that it transcended every language barrier he had ever encountered. The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't the typical game show cheering. It was the sound of people witnessing something miraculous, a nonverbal child finding his voice, a connection being made across neurological differences, a moment when love proved to be truly universal. But Marcus wasn't finished communicating. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper covered with mathematical equations. He handed it to Steve with ceremony, as if presenting a formal document. Steve unfolded the paper and saw dozens of calculations, number sequences, and geometric drawings. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, was a simple equation: 1 Steve, 1 Marcus, 1 Family Feud, and Steve looked at this piece of paper, this mathematical love letter from a brilliant child who had found a way to express profound emotion through numbers and equations. He folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. Dr. Williams was sobbing now. He's been working on that for weeks, she explained. It's his way of saying that this experience, meeting you, being here with his family, it means everything to him. In his mathematical language, infinity is the biggest, most important number there is. Marcus, Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me on this show. But Steve had something he wanted to give Marcus in return. He reached into his other jacket pocket and pulled out something that caught the studio lights, a small high-end scientific calculator that he always carried. It was a gift from his own children years earlier, something he kept as a good luck charm. Marcus, Steve said, presenting the calculator with the gravity of someone bestowing a knighthood. I want you to have this. This is your voice, son. This is how you speak to the world, and your voice is beautiful. Marcus accepted the calculator with trembling hands, immediately beginning to punch in numbers. Within seconds, he held it up to show Steve the display. Jennifer looked over his shoulder and began to laugh through her tears. Steve, she said, he just typed sexist upside down on the calculator. It's his way of spelling sister. He wants me to know he appreciates me being his translator. Steve was amazed. He can spell words with numbers. He can do anything with numbers, Michael said proudly. Marcus sees mathematics in everything: music, art, relationships, emotions. Numbers are his native language. Steve stood up and addressed the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet Marcus Williams. This young man just taught me something about communication that I've never understood before. He's shown me that there are infinite ways to express love, to share intelligence, to connect with other human beings. Jennifer gasped with delight. Turn it upside down, she called out to Steve. The audience rose to their feet in sustained applause. But Marcus had one more surprise. He approached the microphone and, using his new calculator, began entering a long sequence of numbers. When he finished, he held the calculator up high so everyone could see. The display read, 7. Go to hell, Steve asked, confused. Steve took the calculator, flipped it over and read aloud, Go gel. Marcus shook his head vigorously and pointed to Jennifer, who was laughing so hard she could barely speak. The studio erupted in laughter and applause, not at Marcus but with him, celebrating his clever wordplay and his desire to share his unique way of communicating with the world. Not go to hell, she managed to say. He's saying, go spell. It's his way of telling everyone to use numbers to spell words like he does. He wants to teach people his mathematical language. Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of shows, but he had never encountered anyone like Marcus Williams. This 14-year-old boy had taken his nonverbal autism, his mathematical genius, and his profound capacity for love, and had created a form of communication that was more elegant and expressive than most people achieved with thousands of words. A retired math teacher approached with tears in her eyes. Young man, she said, I taught mathematics for 40 years, and I thought I understood numbers. But you've shown me that mathematics isn't just about solving problems. It's about solving the problem of how to express what's in your heart. Marcus, Steve said, I want to make you a promise. From now on, every time I see numbers, every time I use a calculator, every time I count anything, I'm going to remember that mathematics is a love language. You've taught me that numbers aren't just for calculating, they're for connecting. As the cameras stopped rolling and the audience began to file out, something remarkable happened. Person after person approached Marcus, not to gawk at his autism, but to ask him to show them calculator words, to teach them number patterns, to share in the mathematical language he had created. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other autistic individuals and their families, who saw in Marcus a representation of neurodiversity that focused not on limitations but on unique gifts, different ways of processing the world, and the infinite creativity of minds that work outside conventional parameters. Teachers across the country began incorporating Marcus math, using calculators to spell words and express emotions into their special education programs. Parents of nonverbal children shared the clip as evidence that communication comes in many forms, all of them valid and beautiful. 6 months later, the episode aired exactly as it happened, with no editing to minimize Marcus's unique contributions or Steve's unprecedented response to his mathematical communication. The impact was immediate and profound. The calculator became Marcus's constant companion, his bridge between his internal mathematical world and the external social world that had previously felt so difficult to navigate. He began creating mathematical poetry, number sequences that expressed complex emotions, calculation-based art that amazed everyone who saw it. Marcus returned to school as something of a celebrity, but more importantly, as a young man who had found his voice and learned that his way of communicating was not only valid but valuable. His teachers began incorporating mathematical communication into his learning plan, and his confidence grew exponentially. Steve Harvey kept Marcus's mathematical love letter in his jacket pocket for years, pulling it out whenever he needed a reminder that the most profound communication often happens in ways we never expect. He became an advocate for autism awareness and neurodiversity, using his platform to promote understanding and acceptance of different ways of thinking and communicating. The lesson that day wasn't about accommodating differences or feeling sorry for someone who communicates differently. It was about recognizing that there are infinite ways to express intelligence, love, creativity, and human connection. Marcus had shown an entire studio audience that autism isn't about limitation, it's about alternative forms of brilliance. Dr. Williams said in later interviews that the Family Feud experience transformed not just Marcus but their entire family's understanding of his capabilities. "We always knew he was brilliant," she said, "but Steve Harvey helped us and helped Marcus understand that his brilliance could be shared with the world in his own unique way."